The human had never expected his life to take him so far from Earth. Traveling to other planets was no longer just the stuff of science fiction. It was reality. But nothing in all his years of study or preparation could have prepared him for the moment he stepped onto the surface of Lyra's planet. The air shimmered in shades of pink and gold, strange plants with translucent leaves swaying gently even though there was no wind. Towering structures spiraled toward the sky, buildings that seemed alive, glinting with colors that humans didn't even have names for. He had come as a scientist, as a visitor to observe and learn, yet the sense of being completely out of place settled over him the moment his feet touched the alien soil. The palace where he was to meet the royal family rose before him, a breathtaking combination of technology and artistry. He had been told that the young royal he would meet was 19 years old, which seemed impossibly young for someone with such influence. Still, he reminded himself that age meant something different on every planet, and youth on Lyra's world could be the peak of authority. He straightened his posture, trying to calm the nervous flutter in his chest. The ceremony began in a grand hall that seemed larger than any building he had ever been in. The ceiling arched high above, reflecting the light in a way that made the entire room glow. Hundreds of alien dignitaries were gathered, their eyes bright and curious, watching every human movement. And then he saw her. Lyra stood at the center of the room, the very image of her royal status. She was young, yes, but her presence demanded attention. Everything about her, her posture, the sharpness in her gaze, even the way she carried herself, spoke of authority. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and amusement, a small smirk playing at her lips. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice melodic, but carrying an edge that made him instinctively straighten. She tilted her head slightly as if inspecting him. "I hope your species is prepared to meet true civilization." The words hit harder than he expected. He had spent his life studying alien worlds, but he had never encountered anyone so openly dismissive of humans. Still, he forced a polite smile. "I am honored to be here," he said carefully, measuring each word. Lyra's smirk widened. "We have studied your kind," she continued, her eyes glinting with mischief. "You are fragile, slow to adapt, and yet here you are, stepping into a world far beyond your understanding." A quiet tension settled over him. Every instinct in his body told him to respond, to defend himself, to assert that humans were capable and strong. But he paused. He noticed the way the room reacted. The alien dignitaries exchanged subtle glances, some suppressing amusement, others showing respect for her boldness. He realized that this was part of a ritual, a test perhaps not just of his knowledge but of his character. He took a slow breath. His pulse was quickening, but he refused to let it show. There was a strange power in restraint, and he had learned that sometimes silence could speak louder than words. He let the comment hang in the air, unchallenged, and moved forward with calm composure. The ceremony continued, with Lyra directing the proceedings. Each motion deliberate, each gesture commanding attention. The human noticed how effortlessly she moved through the room, interacting with her people, issuing commands, and observing reactions with sharp precision. There was an intelligence there, beyond mere arrogance, a mind trained to lead, to assess, to control. And yet in that same mind, there was the spark of youth, of someone who still tested boundaries, who still felt the thrill of seeing the unexpected. During the formal exchange, Lyra made another subtle jab. "Tell me, human, what do your people achieve in a lifetime?" she asked lightly, almost teasing. "On this planet, in my short life, I have seen inventions and ideas your kind could only dream of." The words were meant to provoke. They could have sparked an argument, a defense, or even embarrassment. But the human chose none of these. Instead, he observed her, studying the flicker in her eyes, the curve of her lips as she awaited a reaction. He realized that she was testing more than his ego. She was testing his self-control, his ability to remain grounded under pressure. He responded with nothing. No words, no smile, no reaction other than a subtle nod, acknowledging her question without giving her the satisfaction of a verbal reply. In that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. He could feel the eyes on him, some curious, some incredulous. And then, slowly, he began to move away, letting his actions speak where words had failed. Every step he took was deliberate, calm, unhurried. The silence he carried with him became a statement of its own. It was not defiance, nor was it fear. It was dignity, a quiet refusal to be demeaned. And as he walked, He felt a strange sense of power growing within him, the kind that came not from authority or weaponry, but from self-possession and inner strength. Lyra watched him go. Her initial amusement had faded, replaced by an unexpected curiosity. She had been certain that a human would respond with defensiveness or embarrassment, but he had done something else entirely. He had reminded her that courage and strength could exist in unexpected forms. In the corner of her mind, she felt a flicker of admiration she had not anticipated. Outside the palace, he paused for a moment, letting the alien sunlight wash over him. The world was vast and alien, yes, but he felt an odd sense of belonging, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of understanding that he could navigate it with his own mind, his own principles. The insult had been sharp, and yet in choosing silence he had not lost. He had gained a quiet victory that no words could diminish. As he walked back toward the edge of the ceremony hall, he caught glimpses of other humans in the crowd. Some had looked fearful, others anxious, all waiting to see how he would respond. In that moment, he realized something important. Strength was not always loud, and wisdom was not always spoken. Sometimes the greatest power was simply to remain true to oneself, even when the world expected otherwise. Lyra turned her gaze away for a moment, lost in thought. She had believed herself untouchable, her words enough to shake anyone. Yet here was a human, walking calmly away from humiliation, refusing to react in the way she had intended. It was unsettling and fascinating. She found herself wanting to understand him, not just as a human, but as someone capable of surprising resilience and quiet authority. The human paused near the garden outside the hall, letting the colors and sounds of the alien world settle around him. Strange birds with translucent wings fluttered in the light, and rivers of shimmering liquid flowed over crystal surfaces. For a brief moment he allowed himself to breathe fully, to absorb the wonder of the planet, knowing that despite the insult, he had remained in control of himself. Inside the palace, Lyra finally spoke to herself softly, almost as if revealing a secret. Perhaps this human is not as fragile as I thought. It was a moment that would change everything. What began as a simple insult, a casual act of arrogance, had instead become a lesson for both of them. For the human, it was a confirmation of the power of restraint. For Lyra, it was the first glimpse of a human strength she had never expected to see. And so, the day unfolded, the ceremony continued, and the alien royal returned to her duties. But neither of them could forget the exchange. For in silence sometimes there was a louder truth than words could ever express. The human could still feel the weight of the royal insult pressing in his mind, even after leaving the hall. Walking through the palace corridors, he noticed how everything shimmered with a kind of living light. Walls seemed to breathe with subtle movements, and soft hums of energy pulsed beneath the floors. It was a world so unlike Earth that it was easy to feel small, insignificant, and yet, at the same time, curiously alive. He paused by a window that overlooked a sprawling garden filled with luminous flowers. Each plant glowed in soft hues, and strange creatures darted among the stems, creatures that seemed part animal, part crystal, and entirely foreign. He took a deep breath, letting the calmness of the garden soothe him. The insult from earlier had been sharp, but now, away from the eyes of hundreds, he could think clearly. He realized that Lyra's words weren't just meant to hurt. They were a test. A young royal like her, confident in her power, probably measured people by their reactions, and his reaction, or rather his lack of one, had already unsettled her. He walked slowly along the garden paths, observing the creatures and the plants, noticing their rhythm and patterns. There was a strange beauty in how this alien world worked, a balance that humans rarely saw. The human felt a spark of curiosity ignite inside him. Perhaps the real lesson wasn't about surviving an insult. It was about learning to understand a culture completely foreign to him, a world that operated under rules and values he could not yet grasp. The corridors of the palace began to feel less intimidating with every step he took. He could hear the faint hum of activity from distant rooms, servants moving efficiently, advisors whispering quietly, the distant echo of other dignitaries passing through. It was as though the palace itself had a heartbeat, and the human, despite being an outsider, found himself gradually sinking with its rhythm. He stopped near a small fountain, where water shimmered in colors that no human eyes had ever recorded. He cupped his hands and let the liquid trickle through his fingers. The sensation was soothing, almost magical, yet it reminded him of why he had come here. He wasn't just visiting for spectacle. He was here to learn, to understand, to observe, and perhaps to bridge the gap between humans and this alien society. His thoughts drifted back to Lyra. He knew she had watched him leave the ceremony, and he could almost feel her eyes from across the hall, sharp and calculating. There was a part of him curious about her, not just as a royal, but as a person. He wondered what it was like to live under such intense scrutiny, to have every word and action measured against the expectations of an entire civilization. Did she ever feel doubt? Did she ever wish for freedom beyond her crown? The human's contemplation was interrupted by the soft approach of an assistant, an alien with pale, shimmering skin and eyes that reflected the room's light like mirrors. "Sir," the assistant said politely, "the young royal has requested a private discussion. She wishes to speak with you before the evening concludes." The human's pulse quickened slightly. A private audience could be intimidating, especially after the earlier insult, but he reminded himself to stay calm. This was an opportunity, not a threat. "Thank you," he said simply. "I will meet her." He followed the assistant through more corridors, each turn revealing new wonders, rooms with floating lights, walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move, and soft whispers of energy that he could feel even without understanding their source. When they arrived at a small chamber at the edge of the palace, the assistant paused. "She will join you shortly," they said, then quietly left. Alone, the human took a moment to center himself. He reminded himself that he was not here to prove himself, but to learn, to observe, and to build understanding. He adjusted his stance, relaxed his shoulders, and waited. Moments later, the door opened and Lyra stepped in. She looked different in the quiet of the chamber, less the imposing royal figure she had been in the hall, and more like a young woman observing someone with genuine curiosity. Her sharp smirk had softened into something closer to a thoughtful expression. "You walk away," she said, her tone even but curious. "Without defending yourself, without saying a word. Humans are strange creatures." He studied her carefully, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "we simply choose our battles carefully." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in contemplation. "You surprise me," she said softly. "I expected anger, confusion, maybe even prideful retaliation. Instead, silence. You carry yourself with restraint," he nodded. "Silence can be powerful," he said simply. "Sometimes it shows more than words ever could." There was a moment of silence between them, filled with mutual observation. Lyra seemed to be evaluating him in a way she had never done with anyone before. He could feel her curiosity, the beginnings of respect, even if she wouldn't admit it yet. "You are different," she finally said. "I have met many humans, but few who can hold their own without speaking." "You make me think," he allowed a faint smile. "Perhaps we are all capable of more than we show," he said. "It's not about who is louder or stronger. It's about understanding, patience, and choosing when to act." Lyra studied him for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed softly. It wasn't mocking, it was thoughtful, almost amused by her own surprise. "I do not often meet someone who challenges my expectations," she said. "Most either argue or tremble. You simply exist without fear of my words." He shook his head slightly. "It's not about fear," he said. "It's about awareness, understanding the world you are in and acting with intention. You insulted me, yes, but you also taught me something about your people, about how you test others. That's valuable knowledge." Her expression shifted again from amusement to reflection. "Perhaps humans are more capable than I believed," she said. "And yet I wonder, why do you remain so calm? Even now when most would be angry, you are composed." He leaned against the wall, relaxed but attentive. "Because reacting in anger rarely achieves anything," he said. "Understanding, observing, and choosing your moment. That is where real strength lies. Words can wound, yes, but they can also pass like wind. The way we respond to them matters far more than the words themselves." Lyra considered his words, her gaze flicking away briefly as if weighing them carefully. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years," she said quietly. "It is unsettling in a way. I'm used to seeing others respond predictably, yet you are unpredictable. Not because of chaos, but because of your control." He gave a small nod. "Predictable responses can be useful," he said, "but only when they serve understanding. Otherwise, they become chains that bind us to expectation. For a while, they simply looked at each other, two beings from completely different worlds, yet finding a strange common ground. The room felt small, intimate, and yet charged with unspoken energy. In that quiet space, respect began to form, not the kind earned by force, but the kind earned by insight and restraint. Lyra finally spoke again, softer this time. "Perhaps I misjudged your kind," she said. "I have always been told humans were weak, fragile, and easily overwhelmed. But you demonstrate something different, something I did not expect." He met her gaze steadily. "We are capable of more than assumptions allow," he said simply. "Judging anyone or any species by appearances alone is a mistake. Strength comes in many forms, and some of the strongest are those who act with patience and awareness." Her eyes lingered on him, and for the first time she seemed genuinely curious rather than judgmental. "I wonder," she said almost to herself, "if I have more to learn from humans than I realized." He smiled faintly. "And I have much to learn from your people," he admitted. "But that is the point of being here. Not to prove superiority, but to understand, to observe, and perhaps to build bridges between our worlds." The moment stretched, filled with an unspoken understanding. Neither was the same as when the conversation had begun. Lyra's arrogance had softened into curiosity, and the human's initial tension had shifted into confidence and calm. It was a subtle victory, not one of words, but of comprehension, connection, and mutual respect. As he finally rose to leave, she nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of the lesson exchanged. "Perhaps humans are not so fragile," she said almost to herself. "Perhaps they are stronger than we are willing to admit." He gave a polite bow and walked toward the door. Outside, the world seemed brighter, larger, and more alive than before. He knew this encounter would linger, not just in Lyra's mind, but in his own. Every insult, every glance, every moment of tension had taught him something profound. Power is not only in words or force, but in restraint, awareness, and the courage to remain oneself in the face of challenge. As he stepped into the corridor leading back to his quarters, he realized that the day had changed everything. The insult was no longer a wound. It was a key to understanding this alien world, its people, and the ways in which humans could navigate it, not with aggression, but with insight, patience, and quiet strength. And somewhere deep within the palace, Lyra watched the door close, her mind alive with thoughts and questions she had not expected. For the first time, she felt a flicker of respect for the human who had refused to fight, yet had won far more than anyone anticipated. The following morning, the human woke early, still carrying the memory of the private conversation with the young royal. The palace was quiet at this hour, the soft hum of distant energy systems blending with the faint rustle of alien plant life outside. He stood by the window of his temporary quarters, gazing at the strange skyline of Lyra's city. Towers spiraled into the sky like crystalline trees, and bridges of shimmering light connected buildings that seemed suspended in midair. The alien sun painted everything in golden hues, casting a sense of calm across the bustling city below. Despite the beauty, his thoughts returned to the previous day's events. Lyra's words, though sharp, had sparked something in him, a quiet determination. He realized that navigating this world would require more than scientific curiosity. It would require patience, empathy, and careful observation. It wasn't enough to simply survive the palace or endure her tests. To truly understand, he would need to read between the lines of her behavior, to notice what she said and what she left unsaid. He dressed quickly, choosing simple attire that would allow him to move freely. The palace staff had been kind but wary, offering guidance without overwhelming him. As he stepped into the corridor, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today, he decided, he would not simply react to Lyra's provocations. Today, he would observe, learn, and begin to understand the subtle dynamics that governed her world. The hallway led to a large observation deck that overlooked the palace gardens. Strange, luminous creatures moved gracefully among the flora, their translucent wings catching the sunlight. He watched them for several minutes, fascinated by their elegance and precision. Even in a world so alien, he could find patterns, behaviors that reflected order and balance. The creatures were small, yet their movements spoke of efficiency and grace. He realized that perhaps this was a reflection of the society itself, complex, disciplined, and deeply interconnected. A gentle chime echoed through the corridor, signaling the arrival of another guest. The human turned to see Lyra entering, her presence as commanding as ever. Though the tension from the previous day had softened slightly, her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, there was a shared acknowledgement of yesterday's encounter. Neither spoke immediately, allowing the silence to carry meaning between them. "You observed much yesterday," she said finally, her voice calm but carrying an edge of curiosity. "You did not react to my words. Most humans would have argued or at least tried to explain themselves. You did not." He nodded, keeping his tone measured. "I was learning. To understand, sometimes it is better to watch first, speak later." She tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Watching is wise," she admitted. "But there is more to leadership than observation alone. You must act sometimes when the moment demands it." He considered her words carefully. "True," he said. "But action without understanding can lead to mistakes. Observing allows one to choose the right moment to act and to act effectively." Lyra's gaze lingered on him. For someone so young, she was remarkably perceptive. "You speak like someone who has lived much longer than you appear to have," she said quietly. "It is unusual for your kind." He smiled faintly. "Experience comes in many forms. It is not always measured by years." She walked closer, her curiosity evident in the way she studied him. "You are patient," she said, "and patient humans are rare. Most are impulsive, quick to respond without thought, but you consider before you act. It is admirable in a way." He returned her gaze steadily. "Patience allows understanding. Without understanding, action can be dangerous, for oneself and for others." The two of them walked through the observation deck together, moving toward a balcony that overlooked the city. Below, citizens went about their daily routines, their movements precise and efficient. The human watched carefully, noting the way they interacted, the subtle signals and gestures that guided their society. Even without knowing the language fully, he could see patterns, a rhythm to their behavior that spoke volumes about their culture and values. Lyra noticed his attention to detail. "You notice much," she said softly. "You are unlike other humans I have met. You do not judge quickly, you do not mock or dismiss. You watch, you learn, perhaps. That is why you are here." He nodded. "Perhaps it is," he replied. "Or perhaps it is simply what I must do to survive in a world so different from my own." She smiled faintly, a genuine smile this time. "Survival is not always enough," she said. "To thrive, one must understand. To lead, one must inspire. And to connect, one must see beyond differences." Her words resonated deeply with him. He realized that this world, so alien and complex, was not just a challenge of science or diplomacy. It was a challenge of perception, of empathy, and of patience. Every interaction, every glance, every word held meaning beyond its surface. To navigate it successfully, he would need to remain aware, adaptable, and calm. They moved toward a quiet garden terrace, where the air was filled with the scent of alien blooms and the soft hum of energy flowing through crystalline fountains. Lyra stopped by a fountain, her reflection shimmering in the liquid light. "You did not retaliate yesterday," she said. "That unsettled me more than you know." "I am used to people responding in anger or pride." "You chose restraint. Why?" He considered the question carefully. "Because reacting in anger rarely solves anything," he said. "It can escalate conflict, create misunderstandings, and cloud judgment. Restraint allows clarity. It allows understanding. And understanding allows effective action." Lyra listened, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You are wise beyond your years," she admitted. "It is disconcerting in a way. I am used to controlling situations with words and gestures, yet you command attention without speaking. It is remarkable." He gave a small, respectful nod. "Sometimes silence carries more weight than words," he said. "It allows others to see themselves more clearly, to reflect on their own actions." For a moment, they simply stood together in silence, watching the alien city below. The human felt a sense of connection, not just to the world around him, but to the young royal standing beside him. Despite the differences in their species, their cultures, and their experiences, there was a shared understanding forming, subtle but profound. Lyra finally spoke again, softer this time. "You challenge my assumptions," she said. "Most humans would have reacted with fear or anger. You do not." You walk your own path, guided by your own principles. It is intriguing. He smiled faintly. We all have our own paths, he said. It is a matter of finding balance between observation, understanding, and action. That balance is where strength lies. Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no judgment, no test, only curiosity and reflection. Perhaps humans are not as fragile as I believed, she said quietly. Perhaps there is more to your kind than I have ever known. The human felt a quiet satisfaction. It was not a victory of pride or ego, but a recognition that understanding and patience could create bridges between worlds, between species, and between individuals. He realized that every interaction, no matter how small, could have lasting consequences. As they continued to walk through the terrace, he noticed the subtle changes in Lyra's demeanor. Her posture was slightly less rigid, her expression less guarded. She was beginning to see him not as a weak human to be mocked, but as an individual capable of thought, restraint, and quiet strength. The conversation eventually turned to the purpose of his visit. He explained his mission, his goals, and his desire to learn from their society. Lyra listened attentively, asking questions that were thoughtful and precise, revealing her intelligence and curiosity. He realized that this exchange was more than a lesson for him. It was a lesson for her as well. She was beginning to see the value of humans beyond assumptions and stereotypes. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the palace and city, the human and Lyra had shared hours of observation, dialogue, and reflection. It was a meeting of minds across worlds, a rare connection that transcended species, age, and status. As he prepared to return to his quarters, Lyra spoke once more. You have much to teach, she said softly. Not just about humans, but about patience, restraint, and understanding. Perhaps there is hope for a better connection between our worlds if more were like you. He nodded, feeling the weight and significance of her words. Perhaps there is, he replied. But it begins with seeing each other clearly, without assumptions, and acting with intention. He left the terrace with a renewed sense of purpose. The insult from yesterday no longer lingered as a wound. Instead, it had become a doorway, an opportunity to build understanding, respect, and connection. Every step he took through the palace felt lighter, more purposeful, as he reflected on the lessons of patience, observation, and quiet strength. And somewhere behind him, Lyra watched him leave, her mind alive with thoughts she had not expected. The human had shown her something she had never considered, that strength could come without words, that dignity could exist without confrontation, and that understanding was more powerful than pride. The day after their long conversation, the human awoke with a sense of quiet determination. The palace no longer felt like an intimidating labyrinth, but rather a place full of opportunities to learn and connect. Each corridor, each room, and each glimmering crystal held a story, and he was determined to understand them all. He dressed quickly and made his way to the observation deck. The city below bathed in the soft glow of the alien morning light. Lyra was already there, standing by the edge of the balcony, looking out over her city. She turned when she noticed him approaching, her expression more relaxed than he had seen before. Yesterday had left a mark, not of anger or offense, but of curiosity, and today she seemed willing to explore it further. Good morning, she said, her voice lighter than before. I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday. He nodded politely. Good morning. And I have been thinking as well, about what I can learn here and about what you might learn from humans. She smiled faintly, a small but genuine smile. Perhaps there is more to your kind than I allowed myself to believe. Yesterday you walked away from my insult. Today I want to see more of your world through your eyes. Show me how you see things. He considered her words carefully. It was unusual for someone of her rank and age to express such curiosity openly, yet here she was inviting him to share his perspective. He realized that this was more than a simple exchange of ideas. It was an opportunity to build understanding between two very different worlds. They walked together through the palace gardens, the soft hum of energy flowing through the crystalline plants filling the air. He pointed out small details, patterns in the way the creatures moved, the way the plants seemed to respond to their surroundings, the rhythm of life that existed in everything around them. Lyra listened attentively, her eyes following his gestures, her mind absorbing each observation. Your people must see things differently, she said thoughtfully. Back on Earth, do you notice these patterns as closely? He smiled. Not always. We are often too busy with our own lives to see the small details. But when we take the time to observe, we find that there is order and rhythm everywhere. Understanding comes from noticing what others overlook. Lyra nodded slowly, clearly intrigued. It seems humans are capable of subtlety. I had assumed weakness, but there is strength here too, in patience, in attention, in quiet observation. As they continued walking, the human explained how humans often relied on adaptability rather than sheer power. We survive by thinking ahead, by noticing patterns, and by working together. Strength is not always physical. It can be mental, emotional, even moral. We learn from mistakes and from each other. Lyra tilted her head, absorbing his words. It is different from our ways, she said. Here, strength is often shown by command, by demonstration, by force of presence. Yet, I can see the merit in your approach. Perhaps it is not weakness, but a different kind of strength. He smiled gently. Exactly. It is not that one is better than the other. They are simply different. And understanding these differences is the first step toward meaningful connection. They reached a small terrace overlooking a flowing river of liquid light, moving in ways that seemed almost alive. The human paused, taking in the sight, and then turned to Lyra. This river, it reminds me of time on Earth. Always moving, always changing. We cannot control it, but we can learn to navigate it. She watched him closely. And humans navigate challenges with patience and foresight, she said. I have begun to see that restraint is not weakness. It is strategy, intelligence, discipline. He nodded. Every species has its own strengths. The trick is learning to recognize them, even when they differ from our expectations. They spent hours together that morning, exploring the gardens, observing the creatures, and discussing the philosophies that guided their respective worlds. The humans shared stories of Earth, how people found joy in small things, how communities worked together, how science and art often blended to create solutions to problems. Lyra listened intently, asking questions that revealed both her curiosity and her growing respect. You speak with clarity, she said at one point. And yet there is more than just knowledge in your words. There is experience, reflection, wisdom. Most humans I have met are focused on immediate concerns. You think beyond the moment. He considered this. I have learned that patience allows us to see the bigger picture. Immediate reactions can cloud judgment. Reflection allows us to act with purpose rather than impulse. Lyra nodded slowly, clearly impressed. It is unusual to meet someone so young with such awareness. I had assumed humans were simple in their thinking, but you prove otherwise, he smiled faintly. We are capable of more than appearances suggest. The same is true of your kind, I imagine. Appearances can be deceiving. She looked at him thoughtfully, then gestured toward a grove of trees whose leaves shimmered in colors that shifted with the sunlight. These trees, they respond to energy, she said. They change with attention and intention. Perhaps humans are similar. They respond to care, to observation, to guidance. He followed her gaze. Yes, he said. Humans thrive when given understanding, when approached with patience and respect. Neglect or aggression often leads to failure. Connection is the key. They continued walking, and gradually the conversation turned toward the palace itself. He asked about the history of the royal family, about the challenges of leadership, and about the responsibilities that came with power. Lyra answered openly, revealing both her pride in her heritage and her doubts about the weight of expectations. It is not easy, she admitted, to be seen as strong, to maintain control, to make decisions that affect so many lives. It can be lonely. I sometimes wonder if there is more to life than power and duty. He listened carefully. I think many people on many worlds feel the same. Responsibility can be heavy. Leadership is often isolating. But connection, understanding, and empathy can lighten the burden. Sharing knowledge, learning from others, these are ways to grow without being overwhelmed. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and admiration. You make it seem possible, she said, that even in a world of expectations and hierarchy, one can find meaning, understanding, and balance. He nodded. It is possible. Not easy, but possible, and sometimes the smallest gestures, the quietest actions, can have the greatest impact. For a long while they walked in silence, each lost in thought. The palace garden stretched around them, filled with colors, light, and life. The human felt a sense of calm he had not expected. Despite the alien surroundings, despite the challenges of cultural differences, he felt at home in this moment of shared understanding. Lyra broke the silence. "Yesterday I insulted you," she said softly. "I meant to provoke, to see your reaction. And yet you walked away. You did not respond in anger or shame. I do not know if I have ever seen such composure." He met her gaze. "It was not easy," he admitted. "But I learned that responding in anger would have changed nothing. Silence allowed me to see clearly, and it allowed you to see me differently." She nodded slowly. "And perhaps I have learned as well," she said, "that strength is not always loud. That dignity can exist without confrontation. That understanding can be more powerful than pride." The human smiled gently. "Exactly. And the first step toward connection is recognizing that we are all capable of growth, of learning, and of understanding each other." They spent the rest of the day exploring the palace and its surroundings, exchanging ideas, sharing observations, and discovering the subtle ways their worlds could learn from each other. The human realized that this experience was teaching him more than any study or research could. He was learning about diplomacy, empathy, resilience, and the quiet power of patience. By evening, as the alien sun dipped below the horizon and the city was bathed in soft, glowing light, the human and Lyra found themselves back on the balcony overlooking the gardens. The day had been long, filled with discoveries, reflections, and moments of shared understanding. Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You have shown me something I did not expect," she said. "Humans are not as fragile as I assumed. They have strength, patience, and wisdom, and you have taught me the value of quiet observation and restraint." He nodded. "We all have lessons to teach and lessons to learn. Understanding each other is the first step toward harmony." She smiled faintly, a rare warmth in her expression. "Perhaps we are only at the beginning of understanding," she said, "but I am willing to continue learning from you, from your kind, and from the world you come from." The human felt a sense of satisfaction. The insult from the previous day, once sharp and stinging, had transformed into a bridge, an opportunity for growth, understanding, and mutual respect. The palace, the city, and the alien world no longer felt intimidating. They felt alive, full of lessons waiting to be discovered. As he prepared to return to his quarters, he realized that this journey was about far more than observation or diplomacy. It was about connection, understanding across worlds, species, and cultures. And in that realization, he felt hope. Hope that even the smallest gestures, the quietest choices, and the most patient observations could create lasting change. And somewhere within the palace, Lyra watched him leave, her mind alive with thoughts she had never considered before. The following morning, the human woke with a sense of calm determination. After days of observing and learning in the palace, he realized that understanding Lyra and her world would require not only patience but also courage, the courage to act when the moment demanded it. He dressed simply, moving quietly through the corridors, observing the subtle rhythms of the palace staff. Every gesture, every glance, every movement seemed to have meaning, a purpose, or a hidden lesson waiting to be discovered. As he walked through the grand hall, he noticed that whispers of his earlier interactions with Lyra had spread among the palace staff and dignitaries. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with cautious respect. The human did not let their attention disturb him. Instead, he focused on the task ahead. Today he would explore deeper, not just observing the palace or Lyra, but seeking to understand the subtle ways her society worked, the unspoken rules, and the power dynamics that shaped everything. Lyra appeared unexpectedly in one of the hallways, her presence commanding yet approachable. She moved with the same grace and precision he had observed before, yet her expression held something new, a flicker of curiosity, and perhaps a hint of respect. "I have been thinking," she said softly, "about our conversations and about how your kind responds to challenges." He inclined his head politely. "And what have you concluded?" he asked gently. Her gaze met his, sharp yet thoughtful. "That humans are more capable than I expected. That strength is not always measured by power or words. You demonstrate patience, awareness, and resilience in ways I have rarely seen." He smiled faintly. "Strength comes in many forms. Observation, reflection, and restraint are as powerful as any weapon or command." Lyra nodded, her eyes following him as they walked through the palace gardens. The morning sun cast long shadows, painting the alien flora in shades of gold and amber. He pointed out subtle patterns in the movement of creatures and plants, explaining how observing and understanding these patterns could reveal the workings of their world. She listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed both her curiosity and her growing admiration. "You notice everything," she said thoughtfully. "Most humans would overlook these details entirely, or dismiss them as unimportant. Yet you understand the value of seeing clearly," he nodded. "To understand a world, we must first see it. To understand a society, we must observe it carefully. And to understand individuals, we must watch and listen before acting." She tilted her head, her expression softening. "It seems humans are capable of subtlety. I had assumed weakness, but there is strength here too, in attention, patience, and quiet observation." They walked in silence for a few moments, each lost in thought. The human could feel the weight of her gaze, not as a challenge, but as an expression of curiosity. She was beginning to see him not as a visitor, not as someone inferior, but as an individual capable of insight, patience, and quiet strength. Eventually, their conversation turned toward leadership and responsibility. Lyra spoke openly about the pressures of her position, the expectations, the judgments, and the constant scrutiny. "It is not easy," she admitted, "to be strong, to command respect, to make decisions that affect so many lives. It can be lonely, and yet I am expected to maintain authority without showing doubt or hesitation." He listened carefully, understanding the weight she carried. "Leadership is often isolating in any world," he said. "The burden of responsibility can feel heavy, but true strength comes not from command alone, but from empathy, understanding, and the ability to connect with others. That is what makes a leader truly wise." She regarded him thoughtfully. "And you speak with a clarity I did not expect. You understand more than you should, perhaps, for someone so young. It is remarkable." He shook his head slightly. "Experience is not always measured by age. Reflection, patience, and observation can provide insights that years alone cannot." They continued their walk through the gardens, and he shared stories of Earth, how humans found joy in small moments, how communities supported each other, and how learning from mistakes was a vital part of growth. Lyra listened intently, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions that revealed her desire to learn and her respect for his perspective. "You speak not only of knowledge," she said softly, "but of understanding, empathy, and connection. These are qualities I rarely see in those who come before me. Most are concerned with appearances or status. You are different," he smiled gently. "We all have the potential to be different, to see beyond appearances, to understand others, and to act with intention. That is what I strive to do." As the afternoon light shifted and the city below began to glow with the soft energy of evening, they arrived at a quiet terrace overlooking a river of shimmering light. The liquid moved with a rhythm that seemed alive, reflecting the colors of the setting sun. He paused, taking in the beauty, and then turned to Lyra. "This river reminds me of time on Earth," he said quietly. "Always moving, always changing. We cannot control it, but we can learn to navigate it, to use its flow to guide us rather than fight against it." She studied him closely, her eyes reflecting curiosity and respect. "And humans navigate challenges with patience and foresight," she said. "I see now that restraint is not weakness, but strategy, intelligence, discipline." He nodded. "Every species has strengths. Recognizing them even when they differ from our expectations is the key to understanding and cooperation." For a while, they simply watched the river in silence. The human felt a sense of connection, not just to Lyra, but to her world and its people. Despite the alien surroundings and the challenges of cultural differences, he felt a growing sense of belonging in this moment of shared understanding. Lyra broke the silence. "Yesterday I tested you," she said softly. "I meant to provoke, to see your reaction. And yet, you walked away. You did not respond in anger or shame. Why?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because responding in anger rarely achieves anything. Silence allows clarity, understanding, and the opportunity to act thoughtfully. It allows others to see themselves more clearly, too." Her expression softened, a rare warmth appearing in her eyes. "You challenge my assumptions. I expected defensiveness or fear. You show dignity and strength without confrontation. It is enlightening," he nodded. "Understanding begins with patience and observation. It is the first step toward meaningful connection, across worlds and across differences. They spent the remainder of the afternoon discussing subtle aspects of her society, the unspoken rules, the responsibilities of leadership, and the importance of empathy in guiding decisions. He offered insights not to instruct, but to share perspectives, allowing her to reflect on her own experiences and assumptions. As the alien sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the city in soft light, Lyra turned to him once more. "You have shown me something I did not expect," she said. "Humans are not as fragile as I assumed. They have patience, resilience, and wisdom, and you have taught me the power of observation, restraint, and thoughtful action." He smiled faintly. "We all have lessons to teach and lessons to learn. Understanding each other is the first step toward harmony." The human left the terrace with a sense of fulfillment. What had started as a simple visit, complicated by insult and cultural differences, had evolved into something far more meaningful. He had begun to bridge the gap between two worlds, not through force or confrontation, but through patience, understanding, and quiet strength. And somewhere within the palace, Lyra watched him leave, reflecting on the lessons she had learned. The human had endured her test, responded with dignity, and left an impression that would not fade. She began to see that strength was not always shown through words or displays of power, but often in the quiet, thoughtful actions of someone willing to understand before acting. It was a lesson she would not forget, a lesson that could shape her leadership, her judgments, and perhaps even her understanding of humans as a whole. For the human, the day had reinforced a truth he already knew. Connection, understanding, and empathy were more powerful than pride or confrontation. And in this alien world, these qualities were beginning to create bridges where none had existed before. The next morning, the human woke with a quiet determination. The days in the palace had taught him patience, observation, and the subtle power of restraint. Yet he also knew that the final moments of his visit would be the most important. Today it would not be enough to merely observe or respond quietly. Today he would act with purpose, leaving a lasting impression not through words alone, but through thoughtfulness, respect, and understanding. He dressed simply and walked through the palace corridors, the soft hum of energy beneath the floors guiding his steps. The corridors no longer felt alien or intimidating. Each curve of the hall, each glowing crystal, each soft sound of movement around him now carried meaning. He had learned to read the rhythms of the palace, to understand its patterns, and to find his own place within it. As he reached the balcony overlooking the city, he saw Lyra standing there, looking out over the sprawling metropolis below. The alien sun had risen to a soft golden height, illuminating the towers, bridges, and gardens with a warm, gentle light. She turned when she noticed him approaching, her expression calm yet thoughtful, as though she had been expecting this moment for some time. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying the same authority as always, but tinged with curiosity. "I have been reflecting on your time here, on your patience, your observation, and the way you have conducted yourself. It is unusual, and yet I find it compelling." He bowed slightly, showing respect but also confidence. "Good morning. I have learned much here, about your world, your people, and about understanding across differences. I hope my time has been valuable not just for me but for you as well." She smiled faintly, a warmth in her eyes that he had not seen before. "It has been. You have challenged my assumptions and shown me that strength is not always loud, that dignity can exist without confrontation, and that understanding is more powerful than pride." They walked together through the palace gardens, the air filled with the soft hum of energy from the crystalline plants and the gentle rustle of translucent leaves. The human pointed out details that many would overlook, the subtle patterns of movement in the creatures, the way the plants seemed to respond to attention and intention, the rhythm of life in everything around them. Lyra listened intently, asking questions that revealed her curiosity and growing respect. "You notice everything," she said thoughtfully. "Most humans would miss these details entirely, or dismiss them as unimportant. Yet you understand the value of seeing clearly." He nodded. "To understand a world, we must first see it. To understand a society, we must observe carefully. And to understand individuals, we must watch and listen before acting." She tilted her head, clearly intrigued. "It seems humans are capable of subtlety. I had assumed weakness, but there is strength here too, in patience, observation, and quiet reflection." Their conversation drifted naturally into more personal territory. Lyra spoke about the burdens of leadership, the constant scrutiny and the expectations placed upon her. She admitted that at times it felt isolating, and that even her authority came with hidden challenges. He listened carefully. Leadership is difficult on any world. The weight of responsibility can feel heavy, but true strength comes not just from command but from empathy, understanding, and connection. A leader who understands those around them gains far more than one who rules through fear or pride. She regarded him thoughtfully. And you? You speak with a clarity I did not expect. You understand more than you appear capable of for someone so young. It is remarkable. He smiled gently. Experience is not always measured by age. Observation, reflection, and patience can offer insights that years alone cannot provide. As they walked toward a quiet terrace, the human noticed subtle changes in Lyra's demeanor. She was no longer the young royal testing him with sharp words. She was curious, reflective, and willing to see the world through his eyes even briefly. It was a small shift, but it made all the difference. This terrace reminds me of something on Earth, he said, gesturing toward a river of shimmering light below. Time is like this river, always moving, always changing. We cannot control it, but we can learn to navigate its flow. The same is true of life and understanding. Lyra studied him, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and respect. And humans navigate challenges with patience, thought, and foresight, she said softly. I see now that restraint is not weakness, but strategy, intelligence, discipline. He nodded. Every species has its strengths. Recognizing them, even when they differ from our expectations, is the first step toward understanding and cooperation. For a long while, they stood together in silence, watching the shimmering river below. The human felt a sense of connection, not just to Lyra but to her people and the rhythms of this alien world. Despite the vast differences, he realized that some truths were universal. Patience, observation, and empathy mattered everywhere. Lyra finally spoke. Yesterday I insulted you. I expected a reaction, anger, pride, fear, but you walked away. Why? He met her gaze steadily. Because responding in anger rarely achieves anything. Silence allows clarity, understanding, and the opportunity to act thoughtfully. It also allows others to see themselves more clearly. Her expression softened, a rare warmth in her eyes. You challenged my assumptions, she admitted. I expected defensiveness or fear. You showed dignity and strength without confrontation. It is enlightening, he nodded. Understanding begins with patience and observation. It is the first step toward meaningful connection, across worlds and across differences. They continued their walk, discussing subtle aspects of her society, the responsibilities of leadership, the importance of empathy, and the ways understanding could strengthen connections between people. He offered insights not to instruct but to share, allowing Lyra to reflect on her own assumptions and experiences. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the gardens, the human turned to Lyra. It is time for me to return to Earth soon, he said softly, but I hope the lessons we have shared will remain. That this encounter, brief though it may be, can help build understanding between our worlds. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. It will, she said. I have learned that humans are not as fragile as I assumed. You have shown patience, strength, and insight, and more than that, you have shown me that understanding can be more powerful than pride or force. He smiled faintly. We all have lessons to teach and lessons to learn. True understanding begins when we see each other clearly and act with intention. They stood together for a few moments in silence, each absorbing the weight of the experience. The human felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had bridged a gap between worlds not through confrontation, but through patience, empathy, and quiet strength. Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but certain. Perhaps this is only the beginning. Understanding takes time, but you have shown me that it is possible. That even across worlds connection can be built, he nodded. And perhaps this is a beginning for humans and your people as well. One small step taken with patience and awareness can lead to much greater understanding. As he prepared to leave the terrace and eventually return to Earth, the human realized that the insult from their first encounter had transformed into something powerful. It had been a test, yes, but also an opportunity. An opportunity to show that strength comes not from force or pride, but from observation, understanding, and restraint. He left the palace with a renewed sense of purpose, carrying the lessons of patience, empathy, and quiet strength. The alien world around him seemed less intimidating now, full of potential, life, and lessons yet to be discovered. Somewhere within the palace, Lyra watched him leave, reflecting on what she had witnessed. The human had endured her tests, responded with dignity, and left an impression that would linger. She had learned that strength is not always measured by words or power, but often by patience, awareness, and understanding. It was a moment neither would forget. For him, it was a confirmation of the power of calm, thoughtful action. For her, it was a lesson in seeing beyond assumptions, in respecting other species, and in understanding that true leadership often comes from empathy rather than force. And as the human departed, stepping onto the spacecraft that would take him home, he looked back one last time at the palace, the gardens, and the city beyond. He knew that the connections he had forged here, the lessons he had learned, and the understanding he had shared would remain, not just in his mind, but in the mind of a young alien royal who had been challenged to see the world differently. It was the end of his visit, but the beginning of something far greater, a bridge between worlds built on respect, patience, and quiet strength. And for the first time in his life, he felt that even in a universe so vast and unknown, understanding could travel across stars, and that one person's actions, calm, thoughtful, and steady, could make all the difference.